Imagine standing beside one of the most powerful families in the world, and choosing silence. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you know the right moment hasn't come yet. While cameras flash and headlines swirl, you're the one who watches quietly, carefully, never flinching. That silence? It isn't weakness. It's control. And now, after years of standing quietly beside Tiffany Trump, Michael Boulos is finally stepping forward. But the truth behind that silence? It's far more layered than anyone expected. This isn't just a story about politics or fame. This is about identity, family, and the courage to walk your own path, even when the whole world is watching. For years, Michael Boulos was the least visible figure in the Trump universe. And that's saying something. In a family known for dominating every headline, every debate stage, and every primetime slot, Michael chose to remain almost invisible. While Donald Jr. clashed with the media, Ivanka became a fashion icon and advisor, and Jared Kushner reshaped Middle East policy, Michael never said a word. He didn't need to. His presence spoke volumes. Michael wasn't raised in chaos. He's the product of a wealthy, highly respected Lebanese-Nigerian business dynasty, an upbringing rooted in global commerce, cultural diplomacy, and quiet power. He didn't grow up in the spotlight. He grew up in boardrooms and international circles where discretion was a sign of strength. So when he began dating Tiffany Trump in 2018, his instinct wasn't to lean in and make headlines. It was to stay grounded. Tiffany herself has always been a bit of a Trump outlier. The most private of Donald Trump's children, she was raised largely out of the political fray. And perhaps that's why she and Michael found each other. Their relationship unfolded with a quiet intimacy, mostly away from the spotlight. Vacations abroad, private parties, quiet appearances at events. There was no frenzy. No Instagram spectacle. Just two people, committed to building something real in a world that rarely allows that. Even when they got engaged in 2021, many were surprised. Not because they didn't seem like a good match, but because they'd kept everything so low profile for so long. And when they tied the knot at Mar-a-Lago in 2022, it was a grand affair. But again, Michael remained composed, polite, but inaccessible to the media. He didn't seek interviews. He didn't stand beside Tiffany making declarations. He didn't try to use the Trump name to launch a brand or build clout. He just remained present. But sometimes silence says more than words ever could. As their marriage settled into its quiet rhythm, the world around them continued to roar. Political turmoil, family infighting, media pressure. And still Michael didn't flinch. For years the strategy worked. People stopped asking who he was. They accepted his absence as normal. They saw him as Tiffany's supportive husband, nothing more. But in May 2025, everything changed. Tiffany gave birth to their first son, Alexander Trump Boulos. And suddenly Michael's quiet support became a question mark. Because while the birth of a child is a private joy, it also revealed deeper cracks beneath the surface of this golden family. The baby shower, held in April 2025, was beautiful. Hosted by Ivanka Trump in Miami, the event was filled with elegance, laughter, and friends. But there were two glaring absences: Melania Trump and Donald Trump himself. No public acknowledgement. No tweet. No quote. Nothing. And in a family that celebrates even the smallest moments with headline-grabbing force, that silence? It wasn't just noticeable. It was jarring. For those close to the family, it wasn't surprising. Melania and Tiffany have long had a distant relationship. Donald's constant campaign schedule made for a convenient excuse. But some insiders whisper that the real reasons go deeper. Rivalries, personal boundaries, unspoken slights. Whatever the truth, the result was clear. Tiffany and Michael were standing on their own. Sources close to the couple say that Michael had hoped Alexander's birth would bring the family closer. That perhaps the arrival of a new generation might soften the lines and open the doors. But instead, it only exposed how wide the gaps had become. And for the first time, Michael's silence began to look like disappointment. Friends say he was deeply hurt, not by politics, not by the public, but by absence. Michael is said to value loyalty above all else. And in a moment that should have been marked by unity, he felt the weight of separation. Quietly, steadily, he began to reassess. Not just his place in the Trump ecosystem, but his family's future altogether. Talks began about moving abroad. Europe, Nigeria. Somewhere far from the noise, where Alexander could grow up with values, privacy, and peace. Somewhere where the Trump name wouldn't be a conversation starter or a source of stress. For Michael, this wasn't retreat, it was protection. And for Tiffany, always more reserved than her siblings, it might have been a welcome shift. But stepping away from the spotlight is never easy, especially when it follows you. Despite the tension, Tiffany maintained her grace. She posted pastel-tinted photos of baby Alexander, thanked friends for their support, and quietly continued to build her life. But the absence of public acknowledgement from key family members was impossible to ignore. No grandparent photo op. No televised celebration. No media moment. Instead, the silence grew. And yet, within that silence, something was stirring. Michael was no longer just observing. He was preparing. Not for fame, but for fatherhood on his terms. No longer content with background presence, he began to consider a new role, one defined not by his wife's last name, but by his own values. He wasn't stepping into the public eye for attention. He was stepping up for his family. Because when you become a parent, everything changes. You no longer measure success by headlines but by presence, by safety, by love. And Michael Boulos, once called the quiet prince of the Trump dynasty, is proving that true strength doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs conviction. So many people underestimate the power of being still. In today's world, we confuse volume with value. But Michael shows us that sometimes the most powerful statements are made without saying anything at all. His loyalty, his restraint, his quiet commitment. These are qualities the world needs more of. He didn't fight for fame. He fought for peace. He didn't shout. He listened. He didn't chase power. He chose love. And now, as he stands at the edge of a new chapter, father, husband, and perhaps independent figure, his silence has transformed into something else, clarity. His actions moving forward will speak louder than any tabloid ever could. This story isn't about gossip. It's about growth. It's about a man who watched the world spiral and decided to create calm. It's about building legacy not through sound bites but through strength. And maybe that's the real twist in this tale. That the one man who never asked for attention is the one we should have been paying attention to all along. If you've ever felt like the quiet one, if you've ever stood beside louder voices wondering if your moment would come, let this be your reminder. It's not about being seen. It's about being steady. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people like Michael Boulos, firm, faithful, and focused. Because in the end, silence isn't the absence of voice. It's the presence of purpose. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you a new perspective, don't keep it to yourself. Tap that like button, share this video, and subscribe to Mittar TV for more deep dive stories that go beyond the headlines. Your support helps us bring these powerful narratives to light. Drop a comment below. What would you do in Michael's shoes? Stay in the spotlight, or step away to protect your peace? Thanks for watching, and remember, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the beginning of something far stronger. Whether or not the Bouloses choose to continue their pursuit of connection or retreat into a new, quieter, less public course remains to be seen. In any case, one thing is certain, baby Alexander didn't just enter a world of wealth and legacy. He arrived into a family wrapped in expectation, shaded by absence, and lined with unspoken tensions that stretch from the corridors of Trump Tower to the pages of international tabloids. His birth was meant to be a unifying moment, a cause for celebration that might mend fraying familial ties. But instead, it has served as a prism, refracting hidden rifts, revealing cracks and magnifying long-standing silences. The silence surrounding the absence of Donald and Melania Trump at the baby shower wasn't just a scheduling oversight, it felt intentional. And when silence comes from a family known for its noise, its implications grow louder. But even before Alexander's arrival, darker rumors had already begun swirling. The so-called loyalty test that Michael Boulos would soon face came not in a formal setting or family meeting, but through a storm of digital whispers. In 2024, social media platforms became flooded with speculative posts suggesting Tiffany Trump had become too close to one of her Secret Service agents. The story, unverified and lacking hard evidence, nonetheless spread like wildfire, reminiscent of earlier claims about Vanessa Trump. For a brief moment, Tiffany's name trended, not for policy, philanthropy, or celebration, but for unconfirmed scandal. Tiffany responded quickly and unequivocally. In a rare moment of direct public address, she denounced the rumors as disgusting and malicious. Her words were firm, emotional, and deeply personal. To her, this wasn't just internet gossip. It was an attack on her character, her integrity, and her privacy at a deeply vulnerable time. She was about to become a mother, and instead of basking in the joy of anticipation, she was forced to defend herself from shadows. But amid all the noise, one voice was notably missing, Michael Boulos's. He said nothing. Not on social media. Not through a publicist. Not even through a quiet leaked source. That silence, as always, became its own story. Some saw it as complicity or at least detachment. Others, more familiar with Michael's quiet demeanor, believed it to be strategic. They argued that to respond would be to validate a lie. That by acknowledging the rumor he would lend it weight. A friend close to Michael was quoted as saying, "He knew the story was bait. He wasn't going to reward the people spreading it by giving them what they wanted." His reaction. That choice, however, did not come without consequence. Within Trump circles, especially among those who believe in vocal, visible loyalty, silence can be mistaken for doubt. Reports suggest that several Trump allies urged Michael to speak out, to issue a short statement or even post a supportive photo with Tiffany. But he refused. He stood by his principles, and, in his mind, by his wife. Still, Tiffany was not immune to the emotional toll. Managing the responsibilities of new motherhood while simultaneously fighting off cruel, public insinuations would test anyone's strength. And while she appreciated Michael's support behind closed doors, some insiders say there was tension about his refusal to say anything, publicly. For a couple whose relationship had always thrived away from the limelight, the idea that silence itself could cause strain was a hard truth. Ultimately, the rumor faded. No photos emerged. No insider confirmed the gossip. It dissolved as quickly as it had risen, a passing storm in an always changing sky. But its aftermath lingered. Michael's silence had been tested, not by outsiders, but by what that silence might signal in moments that required clarity. It was the beginning of a new question. When does discretion turn into distance? As that chapter closed, another one began, this time more dangerous and legally precarious. A failed extortion plot targeting Tiffany Trump came to light, though it remained mostly in whispers and side conversations within political circles. The plot involved an anonymous attempt to extract money or influence in exchange for the suppression of supposed compromising information. Its vague, shadowy nature made it difficult to investigate, let alone prosecute. But it was enough of a threat to cause serious alarm. Michael Boulos, typically reserved and removed from public conflict, reportedly stepped in with uncharacteristic decisiveness. Friends describe him as taking full control of the situation, hiring private security experts, consulting legal teams, and helping Tiffany maintain her emotional footing. This wasn't the silent supporter of Mar-a-Lago galas and holiday family portraits. This was a man protecting his family, taking on a role far beyond that of son-in-law. It said the extortion attempt never made it into the major media outlets because of Michael's swift actions. His priority wasn't optics, it was resolution. He worked to quietly neutralize the threat, shield his wife from the worst of the psychological pressure, and ensure the safety of their soon-to-be-born child. If before he was the quiet partner, now he was the quiet protector. This incident reportedly changed something in him. A man who had once viewed silence as a safe harbor was now beginning to understand its limitations. There are moments, he realized, when silence can be mistaken for absence, and in the face of threats, absence can be dangerous. Discussions about relocating temporarily to Nigeria or Europe followed, not just out of fear but out of a desire for peace and autonomy. Nigeria, where Michael's family commands significant respect and influence, seemed like a haven, a place where baby Alexander could grow up away from political attacks and the omnipresent lens of American media. Europe, too, held allure. Cosmopolitan privacy, cultural grounding, and distance. They never made the move, at least not yet. But the conversation itself signaled a turning point. For Tiffany, the experience reaffirmed what she already knew, that Michael wasn't drawn to the Trump name, power, or exposure. He was drawn to her. And in this moment of crisis, she saw that love takes shape in concrete action. They were no longer just the quiet Trump couple. They were a unit, a family, navigating threats that rarely touch ordinary people. And yet, despite all this, they maintained their composure. Michael didn't schedule press conferences. He didn't go on talk shows. But something fundamental had shifted. He had been tested, and while he still chose the path of discretion, it was no longer about avoiding the spotlight. It was about protecting what truly mattered. In hindsight, the failed extortion plot may become a footnote in Trump family lore, an almost incident, a quiet crisis averted. But for Michael Boulos, it was transformative. It forced him to reconsider the costs of his silence. And it gave him a new understanding of the responsibility he carries, not just as a husband but as a father, a protector, and perhaps someday a public figure on his own terms. It's impossible to know where the Bouloses go from here. Will they continue retreating from the Trump spotlight, choosing privacy over power? Or will Michael's newfound role as guardian and strategist push him into more public decisions, more open leadership? For now, they remain as they have always been, together, navigating their future with quiet conviction. And yet, even in silence, their story speaks volumes. Their story isn't just about proximity to power. It's about the boundaries of love, the limits of silence, and the courage it takes to protect your peace in a world that demands performance. It's about two people who chose each other, not for headlines but for home. And now, with a child to raise and a future to build, Michael and Tiffany are quietly but surely writing the next chapter. If you've followed this journey and found something in it that resonates with you, maybe it's the quiet strength, the loyalty without theatrics, or the reminder that sometimes silence speaks the loudest, then we invite you to stay with us. Like, comment, and subscribe to Mittar TV for more stories that uncover the layers beneath the public image. This is where narratives unfold with nuance, where we look deeper, and where truth is never buried under noise. Your voice matters. What do you think about Michael Boulos' choice to stay quiet, and then act when it mattered most? Would you have done the same? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching. Here is the fully rewritten Part 3, expanded to approximately 700 words, as a consistent, flowing narrative without subtitles or section breaks. It further reinforced the reality that proximity to the Trump name, even for those who quietly try to create distance, comes with built-in complications. And for Michael Boulos, a man who had spent years intentionally avoiding controversy, it was a jarring wake-up call that silence, however noble or calculated it might seem, doesn't always shield you. Sometimes, it simply delays the moment when you're forced to reckon with everything you've been trying to avoid. And as the world grew louder and the expectations around him became more pronounced, that reckoning came closer, inevitable as gravity. After Donald Trump's presidency came to a close, the lives of his children didn't recede into obscurity as some might have expected. Instead, they continued to live in the bright glow of constant surveillance, scrutinized by the media, dissected by online audiences, and often turned into symbols of something larger than themselves. Tiffany Trump, though known for her quieter demeanor and for being largely detached from political theater, was no exception. While she did not pursue a career in media or politics like her siblings, she nevertheless found herself at the center of controversies that bubbled up from her last name. One of the loudest scandals to orbit her wasn't tied to something she said or did, but rather to something entirely logistical: the price tag on her security detail. Reports revealed that Tiffany's travel, particularly international trips taken with her husband Michael Boulos post-White House, resulted in over $1.7 million in Secret Service expenses. While such coverage is legally mandated for children of former presidents, the sheer scale of it sparked public anger. Critics online accused her of benefiting from taxpayer dollars while living a life of extravagance abroad. The backlash grew with intensity, and soon the narrative cemented that here was yet another Trump family member enjoying luxury at the expense of the American public. For Tiffany, the criticism cut deep, not because it was unexpected, but because it seemed to directly contradict the life she believed she was living. Private, distant from political agendas, focused on building a future with her husband and newborn son. Yet that perception clashed with the way things looked from the outside. The Bouloses never issued a public statement or correction about the reported figures, and their silence allowed the narrative to solidify. Even though the expense was legitimate under law, the optics felt wrong to many, and the lack of response did little to shift the story in their favor. That same silence had been a hallmark of their public persona for years. During the height of the pandemic, Tiffany received sharp rebukes online for what many saw as poorly timed or tone-deaf social media posts. Photos of her celebrating her birthday while much of the country was in lockdown, and especially a cheerful birthday post to her father on January 6, 2021, the same day as the Capitol riot, didn't go unnoticed. Although there was never any suggestion she had involvement in the day's political chaos, the timing painted a picture of disconnect. Many saw it as careless, even insensitive. Michael, true to form, never said a word. He didn't leap to her defense online, didn't grant interviews to clarify context, didn't try to correct the record. He stayed quiet. That had always been his approach: be present but say nothing. Behind the scenes, however, that silence may have created friction. Some within Trump's broader orbit voiced disappointment in hushed tones, saying Michael should have stepped up more actively to defend his wife in the face of such harsh criticism. When the couple was newly married, such a stance might have seemed neutral or even gallant. But now, as parents and public figures of a different kind, the stakes were changing. Public silence no longer felt like a virtue. it felt like an absence. Insiders who know Michael describe a different logic. They say he truly believed that engaging in social media backlash only amplified it. He saw silence as stronger than any counterpunch, said one friend. He believed in staying grounded instead of responding to the circus. But others disagreed. To them, silence wasn't power, it was confusion. To an audience so used to transparency, even if that transparency came in the form of oversharing, a refusal to engage started to look like indifference. Not just to critics, but sometimes even to those who expected a little more from someone in his position. By mid-2025, the contours of Michael's public persona were solidified. He was the ever-stylish, ever-silent husband. Always at Tiffany's side but never one step ahead. In a family where women often took the lead, Ivanka with her policy roles, Lara with her media interviews, even Kimberly with her podcast, Michael remained an enigma. While controversies rose and fell, whether over Tiffany's security costs or viral Instagram posts, Michael kept to his strategy. He never explained. He never commented. But the longer this went on, the more people began asking the obvious. How long could one man remain so deliberately quiet in a world that demanded he speak? Then, when no one expected it, when it seemed like his silence had become permanent, Michael Boulos finally spoke. The moment didn't come with a flourish. There was no primetime interview, no carefully coordinated social media campaign, no headline-grabbing tweet. Instead, it happened during a private business summit in Lagos, Nigeria, an event largely overlooked by the American press. Michael took the stage as a businessman and a new father. He spoke about markets and investment, trade and development. But then, somewhere in the middle, he veered. Being a husband and father has reshaped how I see everything, he said. It's no longer about optics. It's about what's real. On the surface, it was a simple, even benign statement. But for someone who had gone years without saying anything at all, it rang out like a thunderclap. That phrase, no longer about optics, landed with unmistakable meaning. It felt like a veiled critique of the world he had quietly married into. A world defined by appearances, soundbites, and spectacle. A world where social media strategy could matter more than substance. He didn't call anyone out. He didn't need to. The contrast between his words and the machinery of Trumpian media was enough. Suddenly, observers took notice. Was Michael signaling a break from the brand? Was this a subtle declaration of independence from the Trump ecosystem? Within hours, political commentators and Twitter pundits were dissecting the line. Some praised his courage to assert a private identity. Others accused him of turning his back on the family name that had opened doors for him. But what truly made the moment monumental wasn't the content of his statement, it was the fact that he spoke at all. Michael Boulos, the man who had stayed silent through criticism, through gossip, through scandal, had finally stepped forward. And then came the biggest surprise. As he concluded his remarks, Michael made a quiet but powerful promise. I will speak more in the future. For now, my focus is on what matters most. My wife, my son, and what kind of man I want to be for them. There were no grand promises of book deals, no brash declarations of a political run. It wasn't Trumpian at all. It was measured, reflective, and intensely personal. But that alone made it newsworthy. After years in the shadows, Michael Boulos was no longer just Tiffany Trump's elegant companion. He was becoming something more. His own voice with his own story shaped not by politics or headlines, but by his family and his growing sense of self. Now, with baby Alexander in their arms and a renewed sense of identity, the couple's future feels poised for transformation. Sources close to them suggest that relocation remains a serious consideration. Europe is on the table. Nigeria too, where Michael has deep roots. The goal isn't to vanish but to reset. They want something quieter, something that's theirs, one source explained. Not an escape but a reinvention. It's not a rejection of Tiffany's family, but a desire to define life on their own terms. Such a move would mark a profound shift. A slow, steady departure from the gravitational pull of the Trump brand. While Tiffany always stood on the edge of that orbit, Michael never entered it at all. His moment in Lagos revealed a growing internal divide, between living for public perception and living for private truth. By choosing distance, they may be creating space for Alexander to grow up away from the noise, the expectation, and the constant comparison that comes with his lineage. Yet even if they physically move, they aren't vanishing. In fact, there's talk that Michael is preparing to take on a much more visible role. Not in politics but in global business and philanthropy. With his ties to Africa and education in Europe, insiders see him stepping into a space that blends enterprise with purpose. He's said to be exploring leadership roles, partnerships, and possibly even launching a foundation. One source put it plainly, he's done being background. Tiffany, for her part, is reportedly supportive. Still quiet and private, her focus has shifted entirely to stability and family. She's determined to raise Alexander with a strong foundation, something rooted in values rather than visibility. The days of flashy photo ops may be behind them. They're reportedly being more intentional about appearances, what they post, what they attend. If their early chapter was about enduring the public eye, this next one seems defined by choosing when and how to be seen. In some ways, that's the greatest transformation of all. They're no longer reacting to gossip or controversy. They're charting their own course in their own way at their own pace. Even as the outside world speculates, they appear grounded, not just in one another but in a shared vision for the future. Their story, once thought to be a mere footnote in the larger Trump narrative, is now becoming its own headline. And if this quiet rebranding has taught us anything, it's that sometimes the most powerful moves come not from speaking loudly, but from knowing exactly when to speak and why. Michael Boulos isn't in the background anymore. He's beginning to shape the foreground. If you found this deep dive compelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More stories like this are just one click away. See you in the next video.